Microphones are on. This is Kip. That's your name. Convene the meeting. Begin with Councillor Secor is out of town. Councillor Reid is going to be late, and I'm advised now that Councillor Hodge is going to be late as well. Any items to add to the agenda?
The dedicated cruise.
The dedicated cruise. All okay.
On the agenda,
Madam Clerk.
this official recognition.
Especially yourself.
Yes. Discussion ensued about relative dedication.
Thank you, Worship. First item are adoptions of the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held Monday, January 27th. The recommendation is that the committee approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is a delegation from Ms. Sharon Gregson, Coalition of Child Care Advocates of BC, regarding the $10 per day child care plan.
So I'd like to start by thanking you very much for making time on your agenda this afternoon to hear a little bit about this initiative. It's obviously very difficult to give you in such a short time an overview of why we need to have a solution, what the childcare crisis actually is in your community and across British Columbia, and why so many other municipalities, school districts, community organizations, academics, etc., are supporting this solution that we're putting forward. My name is Sharon Gregson, and I work with the Coalition of Childcare Advocates. I'm also a childcare operator, and spent a couple of terms as an elected official on the Vancouver School Board, so I bring that perspective with me. So I'm going to give you a very quick overview. You'll see you have a package before you that includes the actual plan itself, this green booklet. It also includes a list of the municipalities and supporters representing 1.6 million British Columbians who have already indicated their support for this plan. A couple of fact sheets that support it, what this plan would mean for parents if adopted provincially, and our latest publication, why this is a good idea for business, and that's being very well received across the province. The final piece is a little bit of a snapshot for you on the BC context in childcare compared to the Canadian situation. So when I say childcare, I mean daycare. So for some people, that's still a term that's used more often. And you'll see that the real name of this plan is the Community Plan for a Public System of Integrated Early Care and Learning. A very long name. It doesn't work very well on Twitter, and so we quickly moved to a branding called the $10 a day child care plan. And that's really resonated across the province and certainly through social media. So this plan is a response to two conflicting realities across British Columbia. We've got more of a focus now on the importance of early learning and more of an understanding that it's the first 5 to 6 years of life that really set the course for lifelong success. We see now more of an emphasis with the expansion of full-day kindergarten for 5-year-olds in our province and Strong Starts, which I know exist in many Coquitlam elementary schools. We've got early learning delivered through the Ministry of Education and Boards of Education. And I did a quick check on the vulnerability rates in School District 43, which are sitting about 30%. And that's a vulnerability measure taken by the Human Early Learning Partnership at UBC. They have a testing that happens for every 5-year-old across the province. And vulnerability rates, sadly, are rising across the province. BC has an ongoing childcare crisis, which we would say results in some of that vulnerability. We've got high fees that are reaching now $1,500 to $1,800 a month in this community for care for toddlers. We've got low wages. People, mostly women working in the sector, are still working for wages of $13, $15, $16 an hour, despite the really significant level of responsibility they have. Not enough quality spaces for licensed quality childcare, long waiting lists, and in fact the only reason in this community or any other that a quality licensed childcare space sits empty is not because people don't need it, but families simply can't afford it. We also see a trend for more big box commercial chain childcares moving in, and they would call themselves the Costco of childcare, and we don't think that that's the solution to use public funds for expanding corporate childcare. It's also true that no matter how well-intentioned and no matter how hard one council works or one municipality or school district, it is a provincial issue. It needs a provincial solution to the crisis, and that's why this plan is being put forward. So this is a made-in-BC plan. We've been able to take the learning from other jurisdictions across Canada and internationally and design a plan that has a cap on parent fees at $10 a day, and many parents now are paying $50 and $60 a day just for one child, so significantly more affordable, and no fee for families making less than $40,000 a year. And you'll recall, of course, that we don't expect families to pay any fees when they access elementary school, kindergarten, grade 3, etc. The plan calls for improving wages and education for the women and men working in the sector. The plan provides for all children to be included on a voluntary basis if their parents want them to participate. The plan calls for an expansion of services based on community need, working with municipalities and school districts, and ensuring quality by building on one of the existing ministry early learning frameworks. The highlights of this plan, and you'll understand this is a very high-level overview. I'd welcome questions once you've had a time to read the material. New piece of legislation from Victoria, not just a downward extension of the existing School Act. Moving childcare out of the Ministry for Children and Family Development, which is primarily a child protection ministry, and into the Ministry of Education for that real continuum of lifelong learning. Expanding roles for boards of education, and we do have a letter of support from School District 43, along with many other school districts. Building from existing spaces, so not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but building on the networks of spaces that already exist. Enhancing kindergarten and grade 1 with early childhood educators supporting those classrooms, and the BCTF is also a supporter of this plan. Strengthening family and school-age childcare, making sure those options remain affordable and viable and high quality for families, and of course investing in the workforce, because there's no sense having a jobs plan in BC if we haven't got a childcare plan to support parents working in those jobs. Here's a snapshot of some of the jurisdictions internationally and across Canada, and even in British Columbia, that have already made a move of childcare, early care and learning, as we call it, moving into a Ministry of Education. So certainly BC would be following the trend to make a move, as we're suggesting. The folks at UBC in the Human Early Learning Partnership and working with Generation Squeeze have done an estimate of what the impact would be on the BC economy if this childcare plan was implemented. More women able to work, therefore paying more taxes to both levels of government. Early childhood educators better paid, staying in the workforce longer, also paying more taxes. Businesses supporting the plan, the Surrey Board of Trade, several chambers of commerce have spoken out that they support this plan. And of course, families saving money if they're not paying high childcare fees, they're spending in their local economies. Quebec has a $7 a day childcare plan. It's not perfect by any means, but it's quite far ahead of where anybody else is in Canada. And they've already realized, the economists there, not the childcare advocates, the economists have realized the savings to their economy and the boost to their GDP with more parents, primarily mothers, able to participate in the workforce. So we've got the Business Council of BC President and CEO saying that increasing support for early childhood education is vital to our success, and you'll see he allowed us to use his quote in our business fact sheet. You'll also see there that Craig Alexander, the senior economist for the TD Bank, is also recommending that governments start to make investment in early childhood education for the long-term benefits to the economy and a stronger society. So this clearly is now the thrust that we're seeing from the business and banking community. So what would implementation of a comprehensive, affordable childcare plan look like? First of all, moving childcare to the Ministry of Education, and as I've said recently to several MLAs, that's a relatively low-cost or even no-cost move that government could make to get in the right direction. A new piece of legislation that looks at the rights of children and families' entitlement to services, working closely with First Nations, reducing parent fees to $10 a day, bringing in some stable budgets for expanding childcare across the province, and planning that expansion with communities. So many, as you'll see from the long list, many are supporting this plan. The motion that is being passed typically, although people are certainly adding their whereases, is nothing really radical. It just says the plan has the potential to make a real difference for BC children, families and communities, and we urge politicians commit to the vision and work with communities to begin implementation. And you'll see, for instance, the City of Cranbrook added their own whereases by saying the lack of child... Oh, okay. You'll see the quote from the City of Cranbrook on the back of fact sheet number 5. So that's the end of the slideshow, and I hope that in the brief time I've given you enough information that you've piqued your interest. The City of Port Coquitlam just today notified us that their Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee is endorsing the plan and recommending to their council to add their name to the list of municipalities supporting the plan. Thank you very much for your time.
We appreciate your coming in. Oh, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The ethics, I'm not terribly well, but I hope you'll be able to hear me. The line on one of your slides about big box intrigued me a little bit because I caught your reference to not wanting provincial subsidies to flow to corporate profits. But many child care providers are in fact small business people.
Yes.
Who are seeking to make a profit.
You're quite right.
Just like big box. And I'm puzzled at the idea that reducing a large piece of supply and a large operator who's easier to regulate, easier to keep an eye on, and quite frankly, easier for labor to organize.
Mm-hmm.
Seems a little...
I'm very happy that you've raised that.
A little more oriented towards support of the small child care facility than supporting child care overall.
Right. So we do make a distinction between those small owner-operator, small business childcare providers and the large operators who themselves call themselves the Costco of childcare. We do see quite a distinct difference between the provision of those kinds of care. There is some questioning about public dollars going to corporate profits in the childcare world in the light of the kind of crisis that the average family is experiencing. And so when we see that what's called the Childcare Operating Fund is going to the bottom line of companies that are traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange for profits, where at the same time we've got families who are struggling to pay $1,500 or $1,800 a month, and early childhood educators who still even in those facilities are working for wages that don't allow them to use the service that they're working in. So we are certainly not suggesting that those big box operators should disappear. They are absolutely welcome to be part of this new system on the same level playing ground that all others are invited in to be part of this big public system. So we don't have enough childcare that we can afford to lose any of it, but we want growth to be in a way that our public funds are being used for public good to build a public system.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll also just note that you've got several Coquitlam residents who have come out this afternoon to support the presentation. So thank you very much.
Feel free to put your hand up. There you go. Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I'd like to refer to a couple of things on the slideshow to have that brought up again. And the first one was towards the end, it was dealing with the economic impact, and there was a figure there about the numbers of jobs created and the tax benefit that came from that.
Sure, happy to.
There it is there. So now, when I heard you say this, I was wondering what the if there's a direct connection here, or was it a correlation, or what? An estimated 17,000 extra women would work. So the argument is that a plan like this would free up these women to enter the workforce. Are you saying there's 17,000 jobs that are in the workforce right now that are not being filled because these women aren't able to work?
Well, we were able to look at some of the data from other jurisdictions and look at what happens when affordable childcare is available and see when parents are able to move from part-time care to full-time care, part-time work to full-time work. And we know firsthand that there are women who would like to move off social assistance who right now are not able to work because they can't afford childcare or know that they would be working only to pay childcare. And so we also hear about on the news what temporary foreign workers are being brought in to fill jobs. So yes, we do anticipate that this is the number of people who would be able to re-enter the workforce.
How many jobs would be created actually in the child care system itself through this plan?
Yeah,
Part of the 17,000?
that would be part of the 17,000 as well, because certainly we only have enough childcare now for about 20% of BC's children, and yet we know upwards of 80% of their mothers are in the paid workforce. So there's a sizable gap of children who, quite frankly, in this community and many others, are in unregulated, potentially illegal and unsafe childcare, and that's where we hear about the kind of tragedies that we hear of unsafe, illegal childcare, and then children not being ready to be successful when they arrive at school.
Do you have an estimate on the number of jobs this would create in the child care system?
Yes, there are those estimates, and I'm sorry I don't have them at my fingertips, but we'd be very happy to email that to you.
Is it a sizable percentage of this 17,000?
No. Some of these numbers are based on the experience of Quebec when their childcare became more affordable, the numbers of women who were able to enter the workforce.
Okay, good. Thank you. And there was another slide, I think just a little after this, with a couple of quotes from business leaders. There. Now, neither of those, unless I'm missing something, is a direct comment on the $10 a day child care plan.
Oh, you're quite right, yes. So this is a Made in BC plan that responds to the BC context and the experience in British Columbia, and would deliver on the kind of system that's envisioned by quotes like this. So no, it's not a direct endorsement.
So were these two business leaders asked to give a direct endorsement?
No, they were not.
And why not?
That's a good question, and perhaps that's something that we'll look at. Certainly we've sent the material to both of them, and we'd be happy to... The quote from Greg D'Avignon was just made at an SFU Public Square event recently, and...
It wasn't in response to your proposal or anything like that?
So I rang him up after he'd made that quote, and having sent him the information, and said, would you mind if I used your quote for our fact sheet number 5? And he said, absolutely, go ahead.
And so the second one does seem to be somewhat related to this, but that's sort of the first one. But the second one is more like a general comment on skilled workforce.
That's
How
right.
does that relate to this?
So the quotes that Craig Alexander has made, actually he's made many, many quotes and could fill pages around the link that he sees between a good start in life, early childhood education, and long-term benefits to the economy and society. So this is just a snapshot that we pulled out, but he's got a lot of material that he's been quoted on in this regard.
So
and he's speaking on the...
Why did you choose this one and not one that was more directly related to the child care plan?
We think this is directly related.
Maybe you can explain to me about the more skilled workforce then. How does the more skilled, are we talking about?
Well, there's lots of evidence that shows that when children have a good start in life, when they are not arriving at school developmentally vulnerable, but they get a good start in life, they're more likely to be successful in school. They go on to have higher rates of post-secondary education, better health outcomes, less teenage pregnancy. So it's actually a continuum.
I'm confused here because I didn't think we were talking about a good start in life. I thought we were talking about giving women the ability to go into the workforce. And you're saying that women who are staying home with their children and raising them and not able to put those children in daycare are not giving their children a good start in life?
No, absolutely not.
That
But
was
when
the
we...
implication.
No, I'm very sorry if that was what you heard. What I've said is that we know that upwards of 80% of mothers with young children are in the paid workforce, and yet we know we've only got enough childcare for about 20% of children. So we've got a large gap of children that are in unregulated, potentially unsafe and illegal care. This is a plan that addresses that. It allows those women to participate in the workforce knowing that their children are safe and well cared for. And when children are safe and well cared for, they're arriving at school better ready to be successful. So this is a plan that has a multitude of benefits for children, women, the economy, society, which is why we've got such a significant number of endorsers.
That's all I need to know.
Thank you.
Okay. Benita?
Thank you very much for the presentation
It's my
today.
pleasure.
You did mention about Quebec, and I think it's a good opportunity to share this because it links to the skilled workforce. I've had the opportunity on 3 separate occasions to live in Quebec and take advantage of their $10 daycare, and was actually there in 1998 when it first began.
Right.
And I can say that when I moved to Quebec in 1998, that my French was not good enough to engage in the employment that I had always done outside of Quebec. And what this allowed me to do was to go back to school and become a programmer analyst and to actually improve my skills and make me marketable in the workforce. So I absolutely agree that it can do that. And within 2 years, I had the opportunity to go to the United States. And without the IT skills that I had, I would not have been able to work under the current visa restrictions at that time. So I just wanted to mention that I really appreciate the fact that there is no municipal jurisdiction in regards to this, but I do strongly believe that not just women, but parents can become restricted just from the fact that they don't have the opportunity to go to school.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Brent?
Well, we raised our children with daycare and put them through. My wife worked full-time all the way through, and we managed to do. Our children wound up, they weren't, I would call in, I don't know how you define regulated, they were in daycare, might be providing within the neighborhood. I'm still not clear on your comment about corporate, but cost was, we had some companies come in recently, Montessori is having different outfits, and buildings specifically designed for childcare better than the neighborhood home, and I think they're probably very good daycare providers next, so I don't understand that comment and your rationale behind it. I think all daycare that we can have that's well regulated, well looked after, well monitored is better than maybe some places that are very small and don't have the resources, the playground or whatever, to properly give the expanded. These couple ones we had recently for us show a design where they have a playground for the top, playground for older kids, separated, parking, the whole thing. So I look at that. See, if that's your Costco of them, sorry, I don't think that's a bad plan for people in daycare. I guess Benita touched on it. It's great that we can all give you support at the local level and everybody else because it doesn't cost us anything. And what you don't show here is what is the cost to the provincial government? 800 million, $1 billion a year? What? I mean, because it's great for business to say, great, do this, it'll help us, and it probably will. But are they willing to pick up the load and share the cost? So you don't tell us, because this is the provincial government's decision, and childcare is an important thing. I've raised our children, it's very important to us. But what you don't show is the cost.
Happy to talk about that. So just to be clear on the corporate childcare reference, so the corporate childcare entity that would fit the criteria of, as they describe themselves, a Costco of childcare, has upwards of 80 to 100 childcare centres in a chain across Canada. So that's the Costco that I'm talking about, not the Montessori that would open up in a community. So to be clear about the cost, so for example, next year in 2015, the provincial government is launching a new tax benefit for parents with a child under the age of 6. And it'll be $55 a month in a tax credit that'll cost the provincial government $146 million a year. So there are some dollars on the table. The provincial government is recognizing that investment in the early years is a good idea.
But I understand. But we're talking about your plan here, a $10
Yes.
day childcare
Happy
plan.
to speak
so
to that.
I would like to, not on that one, but what this plan, if implemented with 20, 30,000 kids or whatever it may be throughout the province, I did it on 20 days a month, 12 months out of the year, with 20,000 kids would be 600 million. I think there's more than that. So I guess the estimate would, I would think, off the top of my head, 50,000.
Do you have an estimate?
Yes, we do have an estimate. So it isn't an estimate that we devised ourselves. We actually worked with knowledgeable people at UBC to cost out the plan. And the $10 a day figuring is based on that estimate. So it really depends on how quickly the provincial government decides to move forward, on how quickly they want to expand the number of spaces. Obviously, we can't provide, and nobody could provide enough childcare overnight to meet the entire need. So whether they take this in 5 or 10 or 20 years depends on what the annual cost would be. The initial move to reduce existing fees for infants and toddlers to $10 a day is costed out at $88 million a year. When we have enough spaces for all children who want and need to access childcare, the same way that they access the K-12 system, the gross cost will be $1.5 billion. Now, that doesn't take into account the savings that come back to government, as we've demonstrated here from the Quebec experience, with the numbers of parents who then can participate in the workforce and who start to contribute taxes who aren't contributing income tax now. So the short term is $88 million a year, building up, depending on how quickly the provincial government moves, to expand a system where all families can access services that are of high quality and not just, as you've said, that perhaps aren't as good a little room with not the backyard that we need. So we're talking about quality spaces.
So 1.5 billion, that is your example of full implementation here.
Full implementation, which could be some time away, and as I say, is the gross cost doesn't take into account the benefits.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? No? I'm sorry.
You know, we can debate the money, right? But it's all about the proper start to life. And there's all kinds of kids that aren't prepared to enter kindergarten, right? And so we don't debate whether it's worth putting money into kindergarten or grade 1 or the public school system for that matter, right? And that $1.5 billion, I think, is a great investment in the future of our society, in our productivity, in our cultural institutions, and just making sure that kids are really well prepared for the rest of their life. You know, some parents do a great job. Some parents do a mediocre job, and frankly, some parents have a very tough time managing it, and this would definitely support them. So we can look at all kinds of extremes and talk about, it's too much money, but it's all about the future of kids, and we don't do that when we talk about public schools. So I appreciate you coming, and I support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay. Actually, we do to some degree. $1.5 billion is not dissimilar from the cost of the post-secondary institutions that are run companies, for example. Perhaps, I guess, a third of the provincial budget for education. So it's for K-12. So it is a significant amount of money, but of course it's not ours. It's the provincial government's responsibility. I'm not certain of the role that we would have in this. I will echo the comments about when we first had a child. I was the stay-at-home and had 20. My wife went back to teaching, and I started a small business at home as parents do in that situation. There's no question that there seems to be two sides to this, and one of them is the ability of the parent to get back into the workforce or back into education or whatever, and the other side is early childhood education. Not the daycare as the public views it, but rather the ECE component. When I was chair of the Select Committee on Creative Education, we recognized and worked hard to try to get the full day kindergarten, for example, and other elements. We see provinces and jurisdictions moving in that direction.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely support the ECE. So I'm trying to understand how much of this really is a push for ECE and how much of it is that the economic side of the argument, both in affordability and on that last question, are you contemplating a means test, or is this to be universal?
So thank you for those comments. Absolutely, several points. So there's no sense expanding childcare spaces if nobody can still afford to use them. So the affordability piece is very important. We also recognize the increasing vulnerability of children when they enter kindergarten. So we know that we need to do a better job of supporting children 0 to 5, and that means supporting their families. We know that BC has one of the lowest rates of female workforce participation in the country. So we know that we've got room to grow workforce participation. And frankly, in order to be successful on the ECE side of it and thinking about what's good for children, we also, in this case, it seems need to prove the economics of reasons why the provincial government should invest. And we think that we've, in this plan, done a good job of putting forward the rationale both from improving early childhood education and outcomes for children, as well as focusing on the economy and the workforce participation piece. So we think that it's a good balance of both, and it's why it is getting the support. The role of municipalities would certainly be to work closely with school districts around expansion of spaces and making best use of public space. Did I answer all your questions?
Okay, well, we actually have worked with the local school district on
Yes.
the Falls, for example,
Yes.
allowing the
Yeah.
modules to come in.
And we definitely do see the rationale for the move of childcare into the Ministry of Education is because there is that understanding now of lifelong learning and the importance of brain development and the quality of experiences in 0 to 5.
Last question from me. Has there been a discussion about the socialization of that, for example, putting it in the school district or having it be not just publicly subsidized, but publicly not?
Yes, that's part of the plan. So expanding spaces within the public sphere is part of the plan. And school districts are, having been a trustee, I can tell you that school districts are very aware of being relevant to communities, and with the expansion of Strong Start and Ready, Set, Learn and Welcome to Kindergarten, school boards are very aware of what the issues of what happens to a child before kindergarten impact any remedial action that needs to be taken, special needs support, and the child's success in elementary school. So we know that there is that link, and school boards are very interested in supporting that link.
Cool. Does that give you enough time to catch up, Councillor Hodge? Said he
I'll-
was going to be late, but okay. we're good.
But I'll be able to watch your presentation on the archives, so thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? We do thank you for coming in.
It's entirely my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you to those audience members who joined in for support.
Item 2 is report of item 3, is report of Deputy City Manager regarding the Leadership Development Program. We have introductory comments by our City Manager and a presentation by our former Manager of Coquitlam.
It's my privilege today to introduce our Leadership Development Program. It is a continuum along our Growing Your Own initiative, and it tries to, it does identify potential leaders of tomorrow, and does a couple of things. It focuses additional training and opportunities their way. At the same time, it looks into our business planning process, and this is something that we are very proud of because I think it's unique in terms of these type of programs. It integrates this program with Council's business priorities, and it's one of the priorities which perhaps we would have had a little bit less resources able to focus on, and assigns that project to one of the leadership candidates. The original thought for the program actually came from Dan Mooney in our Roads Operations Group, who had been exposed to a much more limited program in another organization and just highlighted it as a good thing to do. And Michelle Hunt and Linda Gunther took it and developed the program from here. And so, we're quite excited about it. And I'd just like to turn the report over to Michelle and Linda for a quick walk.
Thank you very much. The other person I'd like to recognize that was part of the original team that did some brainstorming and put this together was Jay Gilbert. So it was Linda, myself, Dan, and Jay that really sort of put our heads together to come up with the Coquitlam model. One of the first things that Linda did when Dan bought us this idea was look at some of the other programs that are out there. Metro Vancouver has one. They have a real focus around sustainability and putting that into their leadership program. The North Shore municipalities have a partnership with BCIT, really focuses on the frontline supervisors. City of Richmond had a secondment program during the Olympics where they were taking people out and putting them into special projects under the city manager, but around the Olympics, and that seems to have gone by the wayside now. And City of Burnaby has a partnership, was with the University of Alberta, But I think they've moved on from there. So we sort of looked at all these various models out there and said, okay, what's going to work for Coquitlam? And we came up with our own model. It's got two components. The first one is around the leadership development, and actually I'm going to go a step back. We had such a huge interest when we put this out there on the cork board. Originally we thought we'd get 1 or 2 people that we'd take and put through this program, but we had 27 people apply. And so we sort of went back to the drawing boards and said, okay, you know, everybody's so excited about this, how can we accommodate more people? And so we broke it down into this cohort program. The first cohort is going to go through, cohort A we're calling them, is going through the 2 components, and then we have cohort B, which is going through basically the leadership development piece of it. So as I said, there's 2 pieces. The leadership development is based on individual assessments of the candidates and then sort of some personal development plans. And Linda's looking at training for them and webinars and reading. And if it's a skill that they all require, then we're going to do it as a team. If it's something individual, then she'll find something individual for them. And then the other piece is the piece around the project. And again, that took some tweaking as well. We sort of went back to the drawing board a little bit on that. Because originally we were going to pull them out of their own department and put them in another department. And for a couple of reasons. One being that we thought, well, we're trying to give them, exposure to the rest of the organization and putting them through quite a big challenge in that, we're raising, they've got to raise their game. So let's actually leave them in their department, give them something where they already have the technical expertise, but then they can really sort of focus on those leadership capabilities. And the other part, obviously, was that every department's got a huge workload, and so let's look at some of the C priorities in the business plan and pick some of those out that are sort of have a discrete beginning and an end that we could turn over to the candidate as a project. So huge benefits on both sides from what we could see. Obviously, from the employee's perspective, they're getting this personal and professional development. Hopefully, it will help their career advancement down the road. The big piece, though, is that they're actually getting to put their skills that they're learning into use, and also being exposed to the organization as a whole. All the projects sort of span various departments. But also getting sort of involved in the political end of things and being able to, we're hoping that each one's going to end up in a report to council, which is why we want to introduce them to you, so that they can put put that lens on what they're doing as well, which a lot of them haven't had to do before. From our perspective, basically it's another tool in our toolbox when we go out for recruitment. It starts to position us as a real employer of choice because we have a variety of different benefits for coming to the city. This is another one. Employee engagement, as I say, we had such an overwhelming response, and not only did we have the 27 people that actually applied, but Linda took countless calls and emails of people that are interested and said, we're going to see how this first year goes, and then, we'll maybe apply next year, but just overwhelming and real excitement. I mean, we all really felt the excitement. People were really happy about this. As Pete mentioned, it's sort of part of this whole succession management, starting to develop a pool of potential leaders for the future. Trends in municipal workforce are showing that, over the next few years, baby boomers are retiring. The competition for talent is going to become much more fierce, and so this is really going to help us with that succession planning piece. And lastly, as Pete also mentioned, is really focusing our resources on key business plan priorities that council's approved for this year and giving us some focused resources. So now I'd just like to introduce you to our participants, and I'm giving you a list of the projects that they're working on. Melanie is right there, and she's from engineering. Michael Donegal, you've probably seen before, he's development planner. Sandra Morrison from our HR department. Carlos Perez from engineering. Ryan Perry, community planner. I know you all know Ryan. Neil Kukesh, who is our manager for the Sport and Leisure Complex. Chris Sidaway, also from PSLC. And Glenn Spence, who is our supervisor of bylaw enforcement. So They all have a project that has been assigned to them. They've all put together sort of a project charter that outlines the scope and the deliverables and the time frame. Made this very formal, which got to get Pete on side with that one.
They can be changed, but only, thoughtfully changed.
And yeah, many of them have started their projects, and they're excited to get going. So I'll turn it over to you to see if you have any questions.
Back up and just run down the projects.
Sure. So Melanie's project, actually, Melanie's is not on the business plan priorities, and she actually raised this with us. And this speaks to one of Council's priorities about really showcasing what we're doing with our green building practices. That, when all our policies and our building practices, not only is it good from that perspective, but we're being very environmental in those. So Melanie said, hey, there's lots and lots of things that Coquitlam's doing that the public don't know about, even our own staff don't know about, and she was going to work with corporate communications to put together a campaign on that.
Thank you.
The Green Streets, our Green Street up in the northeast there, council had asked that we do sort of a review of that, what worked well, what needs improvement, pros and cons, what can we do for future Green Streets, and so Michael's doing that one. Our customer service program, which is part of our business improvements customer service, Sandra's going to be in a very fun and creative way, reinforcing the message that, we're here to serve our customers, and looking at sort of easy tools and tips and tricks and things to get people, always thinking that, we're here as public servants, and if we're not serving a member of the public, then we're serving somebody that is. That's kind of our motto. So Sandra's taking a lead on that one. The parking structure business case, looking at is there a business case for a parking structure within city centre, and that'll actually come follow up to a report that Engineering and Strategic Initiatives doing regarding the Evergreen line. So once council's seen that and given some direction on that, then Carlos will start on his project. Housing choices review, again, council had asked staff to look at housing choices and do a follow-up sort of review on that. The sponsorship program, which I was here just a couple weeks ago. So Neil is actually taking the piece that's going to be looking at the policy work on that and rewriting the various policies. We've issued the RFP for doing the inventory valuation, and so once we get that in, he'll be working with the resource that's doing that. Public consultation framework. Chris is going to be working with corporate communications, and as you know, there's so many different ways now that we can communicate with the public on our various projects, and there's lots of social media and lots of online engagement tools, and this is really looking at how we incorporate them, how we incorporate them, and really looking at our overall framework for engaging the public. And lastly is another council-directed item, which is looking at the secondary suites, the legal secondary suites, and doing a bit of a review on the enforcement of those. So Glenn's well positioned to do that one.
So we're going to be doing these through the whole year, hopefully get most of them, if not all of them, done by the end of this year, but we're targeting October, November, so you'll see them come through. Each one of them will result in a presentation to the team first, and then result in a presentation to you. So you'll see the individuals here in a more focused setting sometime coming up. We just thought it was important for you to have a semblance of what we're doing in that regard.
Well, thank you. I'm looking at that communication of engineering, for example. Melanie, is the rain garden one, that was an element of that?
Yes, it is. So there's an initiative that was started with recognizing, trying to get the public aware of what our rain gardens are and also the water quality ponds. So I want to expand on that to do a citywide campaign that are recognizing the city is building responsibly and building sustainably through our use of green infrastructure.
Thank you. Well, that's one of them that frustrated me because, for example, at the park, Galloway Park, it looks like it's an unkempt part of the landscape rather than, and it's clear that water. I had one person comment that the catch basin is too high; it doesn't drain to the catch basin. Well, that's what its purpose is, and so the explanation is is very helpful, and I appreciate that. And in fact, each one of those projects is something that I've heard a council member or more than one member of the public raise as an issue, perhaps, or as something that we can look to continuously improve the organization. And I thank those that are really taking the leadership on this.
And just on that one, this is one that we actually did highlight was a need, and it was actually Joseph Biazegia, who as a consultant as part of the sediment control bylaw, identified this as a part of it. Identified as part of it, sort of got it approved, then it didn't fit in any part of the organization, and sort of like then it drifted a little bit. And this was not one that we as a senior management team highlighted. It was not on our original business plan priorities, but actually credit goes to Melanie for recognizing that there was a need there that was being not as filled as could otherwise be, and she suggested as an alternative to our initial suggestion. And so I thank her for that, and I think it's going to really do fill a niche that is not filled as well as it could be. So, and those are kind of things that are coming out of this program.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rasmussen and Councillor Lee.
Well, thank you very much. Love the report. I think it's something we need. I've talked with Peter for the last couple of years about continuing our improvement, growing our own, basically. How do we grow our own? How do we build that capacity? Because as we do know, there is shortages within the municipal area for finding replacements in positions. You would like to have it come from within your organization. And so this is something that I've talked about with Pete over the couple of years now. I'm great to see this here. The one thing, though, that a couple questions I have is when the cohort group finishes, they've done their projects, what are we doing for a follow-up to keep them engaged? Because sometimes, you do this, there may not be opportunities. How do we keep that growth pattern happening?
Good question. Any thoughts, Linda?
After Linda, I've got some thoughts, so go ahead, Linda.
We really haven't discussed it all that much, but it's a good point. I mean, there's always projects that don't have resources, and maybe.
Well, I'm also I guess my question is not so much the resource, it's about how do we check back in and continue that? Because, I mean, we can do these cohort and these projects and everything, gain these people some experience, but then how do we report? We're going to report back to them on their abilities.
Absolutely.
But then do we say to them, well, we want you to do this and this, or apply these courses that you continue your growth and development? Because I guess my thing is that you get the first group and the second group, and there's no commitment that, by taking this, you're going to move up to X position. But it gives you that ability to grow. And I guess my point is I want to see a second part to this. Since you haven't really, how do we continue this program in a more ongoing growth area from the people that when they do enter it? And I think there has to be, you got 27 people, and there's certain, but after A and B, there may have to be a cap. You can't have everybody involved.
Well, there's a whole issue around if you try to do too much, then sometimes the way I describe it, sometimes it collapses under its own weight. You do not want that. What this is a very focused program doing two things: giving a number of individuals additional skills, focusing some project outcomes, which that's going to be a good thing by itself. But then at the end of it, those individuals will not only have more skills, but will be more visible to the organization. Their probability of getting future promotions is going to be higher because of that. Not only their abilities are increased, but their exposure has been increased, so more people are aware of the talent that is there. So in my perfect world, they would be integrated into the ongoing management in a longer term setting, and the management of our city will be increased as a result.
And I think that's great. I think that answered part of my question, but I think it needs to be fleshed out a bit more. But what I'm really proud of, though, is the willingness of the staff in this organization willing to step up and improve and see a future within them here. And we want them to have that. I want that feeling there, and it's great to know that feeling's there. And from, Melanie, just Richard brought it up. I live in the Northeast. We've gone through the water quality ponds, and I've been living with people, what is this? It's been something. To get people that are explained to respect them, what they're putting in there, not dropping their dog bags and things in there like that. But I really do think it's a good program, and I really thank you for starting that one. I just wanted to say, because that's been something I've been biting on for a couple of years. It hasn't been well understood. But I think this is a great program, and good luck.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how impressed I was with this program, just in the sort of, not on the specific projects, because those are fine, but just in the concept where we're not just, first off, the initial step that we need to provide this sort of leadership experience and training, that's great. And then, and perhaps more importantly, that it's not going to be sort of training that's just operating in the theoretical or hypothetical realm, but is applied and practical. So, wow, that's a win-win, and it adds to Pete's perfect world. No, anyway.
I didn't want to imply that we are in a perfect world.
No, I know.
As I envision
We
what
start
perfection
building
might
brick
be
by
like.
brick. But anyway, very impressive that there's feet on the ground on this one. It's not just all abstract. Good job.
Keeping an eye on the perfect world. That's our target.
Okay, good.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yes. And I can hardly wait till they start coming, making the presentation.
Then we'll tear them apart.
I look forward to Glenn Spence completely solving the whole secondary.
That's right.
And thank you for taking it on, Glenn. Who suggested that?
I look forward to Glenn Spence completely solving the secondary suite problem.
He will. I got faith in
Like,
Glenn.
need another week or so?
It's tough enough to take on that tough subject. Phantom weight kind of look.
And on that,
That concludes the items on today's agenda.
Move adjournment.
Second.
favor, opposed, carried unanimously.